Chapter 11. Judas's person who knows the secret. The disciples looked at one another, uncertain. We must not look at others, but ourselves. Faith is the relationship between God and I. Because of whom did Jesus bear the cross? Though it was to save all of humankind, ultimately it was because of me. So I must always look back upon myself. Since Jesus said, "One of you will betray me," the disciples looked at one another uncertain of whom Jesus spoke. However, they do not need to be uncertain. They were uncertain because they could not believe what Jesus said. In their minds, it doesn't make any sense to say that there is someone who would sell Jesus. They were people who threw themselves away to follow Jesus. So how would such words be believable? Thus, amongst the 12 disciples, 11 of them don't know God's secretive plan. So would Judas have also not known? The disciples look at one another, questioning this. But Judas was someone who knew God's plan. Jesus said, "Do quickly what you are going to do." And Judas knew the work he was to do. Judas is person who knows the secret. When Jesus told Judas to do quickly what he was doing, none of the disciples who were sitting there understood what that meant. Who could know such a secret? Not anyone knew. The disciples knew Jesus as the Messiah, so who would want to be used in the work of betraying him? If one were to betray him, one's name would fall to the ground and be trampled on, so who would be readily compliant? No one other than Jesus and Judas knew this work. God's work was a secret known only by the person who received it. John 13:29 says, "Some thought that because Judas had the common purse, Jesus was telling him, 'Buy what you need for the festival,' or that he should give something to the poor." At this time, Jesus and Judas were doing the spiritual work of heaven. But since the disciples didn't know this secret, they were thinking of something totally different. When it comes to God's work, we must not add my thoughts to it. If Judas had not known this secret, he would have never betrayed Jesus. However, God, Jesus, and Judas were already in the same line of communication. Because they were one, they went the same road. Then, the person who knows the secret is a great person. If Judas did not exist, who would do this work? Would I be able to do what he did? If it were not God's plan, one couldn't do such work on one's own volition. Satan is also a spirit that God manages. If the work of selling God's Son and nailing Jesus to the cross were not God's plan, even Satan could not do as Satan pleases. As Judas was someone who knew the secret to be fulfilled in God's plan, wouldn't Judas have been someone whom Jesus trusted very much? Better for him if he had not been born. Judas Iscariot is a person used from inside of heaven's great plan and covenant. Satan put inside Judas the thought to betray Jesus. So Judas sold the Messiah to the chief priest. He betrayed the Savior of life. Judas was used just as it was according to God's plan. But Jesus said it would have been better if he had not been born. Jesus was sad because he knew that due to this work, people would point fingers at Judas and trample on him. Judas was someone who partnered with the work of heaven and earth. So wouldn't the heart of Jesus have ached very much? Who would want to sacrifice like this in the work of betraying Jesus? That Jesus said It would have been better if Judas had not been born, was Jesus expressing his sad heart. What would be the thing that we must realize here? If Satan enters our thoughts, we do the work of betraying the life inside us. Judas did such work to fulfill God's will and covenant, but we must not receive Satan's control and betray the life inside us. Judas chooses death. For the final sacrificial rites of the law, Jesus died as the Lamb. As this work was God's plan, Jesus died for God. Jesus died for the Jewish person and also died because of the sin of the other. Jesus died to change sacrificial offerings that can be seen into sacrificial offerings of the Spirit. And Jesus died for the glory of God. It says in Matthew 27:5, throwing down the pieces of silver in the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. Judas worked for 3 years for the tremendous plan of God and buried himself. Before bearing the cross, Jesus said to his disciples in John 12:27, "Now my soul is troubled, and what should I say? Father, save me from this hour?" At this time, Judas's soul would have been troubled as well. Judas is someone who lived and died for God and for this earth, that is, for heaven and earth. If we had remained on this earth, heaven's work could have gone wrong. So Judas chose the path to kill himself. If he didn't have faith and trust in Jesus' word, how could he have killed himself? A genuine, best disciple is a person who can die for God. Jesus died for God, and the person who can die for Jesus is the best disciple. But before Jesus bore the cross, Judas first did God's work and went. Jesus would have told Judas God's plan and said, "You complete this work first, and then go. I will be right behind you." Would God have it so that Judas, who knows the entirety of such an amazing plan, remains alive? In the world as well. The government does not just let a person who knows something top secret wander around, because the secret must not be revealed. Judas had known an amazing secret of God. If Judas stayed alive, having done this work, it would have been difficult for him to be together with the disciples. Would his lips not open after having spent some time with them? God does not use just anyone. The chief priest who met Judas for this work of selling Jesus is not someone whom just anyone can meet. Judas is that much of a great person and someone with a strong sense of responsibility. That is why Judas himself chose death. Fill the place that was determined. Acts 1:20 says, "For it is written in the book of Psalms, let his dwelling place be desolate, and let no one live in it, and let another take his office." Judas, who received love amongst the 12 disciples of Jesus, has gone inside of God. And the above verse is saying that this place will be filled. The apostles prayed in Acts 1:24-26, "Lord, show us which one of these two you have chosen to take the place in this ministry and apostleship from which Judas turned aside to go to his own place." And they cast lots for them, and the lot fell on Matthias, and he was added to the 11 apostles. This word is saying that such place will not be done away with, but filled by another person. Also, this word is saying that the descendants of Israel, who cannot go inside of a place in the kingdom of heaven that God prepared will be taken out. God will fill that place with the other instead. Romans 11:17 tells us, "But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, a wild olive shoot, were grafted in their place to share the rich root of the olive tree," so that the amount that was broken off amongst Israel could be filled, the gospel has gone inside of the other. To obtain spiritual Israel from inside the other, Jesus grafted the other to Israel of Judea, Israel of the land of Judea, and Israel of the land of the other became grafted. God definitely fills the place that was determined and goes on fulfilling God's plan just as it is.